The playground is drowning in October heat. 4:13 in the afternoon. The desert sun beats down like a hammer on Henderson Park, and the wood chips beneath Nora Hartley's knees are warm enough to burn through the thin fabric of her uniform. She is 28 years old but looks 45. Her dark hair, pulled back with a rubber band from a gas station, frames a face carved by exhaustion. Deep brown eyes, hollow at the edges. Her nanny uniform, black pants, white blouse with a coffee stain on the collar that won't wash out, hangs loose on her frame. She weighs 112 pounds, down from 134 just 8 months ago. The little girl in front of her is 6 years old. Emma. Golden curls, pink sneakers, a scraped knee bleeding slow drops onto tan skin. Nora pulls a thermos of water from her bag and pours it gently over the wound. Her hands are steady even though nothing else in her life is steady anymore. Not her apartment, the eviction notice sits folded in her jacket pocket, the numbers typed in red ink, a deadline that screams at her every time she moves. Not her money. Not her future. But her hands, when they touch a child's hurt, they become something reliable. There now, Nora says, her voice soft like she's soothing something wild. You are so brave, Emma. The girl sniffles and looks up. It doesn't hurt so much when you touch it. Nora's chest cracks open a little. Then the air changes. She feels it before she hears anything, a shift in the playground's rhythm, the way a bird stops singing right before a storm. Nora's head rises. 2 men are approaching from opposite sides of the playground, moving with the kind of purpose that does not belong on a children's equipment set. The first one has a spider tattoo crawling up his neck, black lines reaching toward his jaw. He wears a dark jacket despite the heat. The second man carries a black duffel bag. Both of them are looking at Emma. Nora's heart hammers against her ribs like it's trying to escape. She stands slowly, pulling Emma behind her legs. The child's small fingers grip her thigh. Stay back from her, Nora says. Her voice does not sound like her own voice. It sounds like something made of iron. The tattooed man's eyes flick to her for 1 second, a measurement, a calculation, then back to Emma. He does not care that Nora spoke. He does not even register her as an obstacle. She is nobody. A thin woman in a stained uniform, standing in his way with nothing but determination and $34 in her pocket. He takes another step forward. Nora's phone is already in her hand. She does not remember pulling it out. Her thumb finds 911 with muscle memory born from 8 years of being afraid. The line rings, connecting, and she yells into it with everything she has left. There are 2 men trying to take a child. Henderson Park. East Side. They are right here. Come now. Please come now. The dispatcher's voice, tinny and distant, asks for her location again, but Nora is not listening anymore. She is watching the tattooed man's jaw tighten. She is watching the second man glance at a black Mercedes parked 50 yards away in the lot, its engine running, its windows tinted the color of secrets. Sirens begin to wail in the distance. The men exchange a look, quick, brutal, and they turn and run. Toward the Mercedes. Toward whatever happens next. They move like they have done this before, like failure tastes familiar. Nora stands in the wreckage of the moment, Emma clutching her leg, both of them shaking. A man emerges from the Mercedes. Tall. So tall that even from 50 yards away, his height seems to distort the playground around him. 6'3" in a charcoal grey suit that costs more than Nora's monthly rent. His shirt is open at the collar, showing the muscled chest beneath. His hair is dark, silvered slightly at the temples. And his eyes are the color of storm clouds, and they are looking directly at her. He walks toward them with movements that seem to bend the air around him, like the world is rearranging itself to accommodate his presence. Uncle Gio! Emma screams and breaks away from Nora, running toward him with her arms open, her wounded knee forgotten. She saved me. She was so brave. Giovanni Valenti catches the child and lifts her, his expression softening in a way that Nora will later understand changes everything. He holds Emma against his chest, and his dark eyes find Nora's face again. He memorizes her. She can feel it. This stranger, this dangerous man who pulls up in Mercedes cars and makes two armed criminals run like they are fleeing the apocalypse, he looks at her like he is photographing her face into his memory. "Thank you," he says. His voice is low and solid like an oath. Then he turns and carries Emma back to the car. Sirens grow louder, closer. Red and blue lights begin to paint the parking lot. And Nora stands alone on the wood chips, her phone still in her hand, the dispatcher still asking if she is safe, asking if the threat is gone. She has no idea who that man is. She has no idea who Emma really is. She has no idea that in trying to protect a stranger's child, she has caught the eye of the most powerful man in Las Vegas. If this story is moving your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone you trust and subscribe to our channel so you do not miss what happens next. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us understand how Nora Hartley arrived at that playground with $34 in her pocket and a death sentence arriving in just 12 days. 48 hours earlier. 3:22 in the morning. Mel's Diner on East Fremont Street. The clock on the wall ticks past the numbers without mercy. Nora sits in booth number 7 with a cup of coffee that cost $2.50, which means she has $31.50 left to her name. She has 7 days left before the eviction notice becomes legal. Before Douglas Hale shows up at her apartment door with papers and fists and that same violent hunger in his eyes that has haunted her for 8 years. The diner is nearly empty. A trucker at the counter, nursing black coffee. An old man in the corner booth, reading a newspaper that is yesterday's news. The waitress, Janet, stopped checking on Nora's coffee an hour ago. Nora is not a customer. Nora is a woman taking up space, occupying a booth that could be filled by someone willing to order food. The fluorescent lights hum their dying electric song. The smell of grease hangs thick in the air, mixing with burnt coffee and something else, the particular smell of exhaustion that clings to people who work night shifts, who sleep in their cars, who count dollars like prayers. Nora pulls the eviction notice from her jacket. The envelope is worn soft from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. The paper inside trembles in her hands as it always does. The red numbers scream at her. $35,000. 7 days remaining as of this morning. She has been a live-in nanny for Sophie Langford for 3 years. Sophie Langford, who lives in a mansion on the hill that overlooks the entire city. Sophie Langford, who wears diamond earrings that probably cost more than Nora's annual salary. Sophie Langford, who asked her yesterday to pick up her dry cleaning and then, when Nora returned with the clothes, told her that her services were no longer needed. Effective immediately. No severance. No notice. The landlord's eviction came faster than any human should have to process. 12 days to move out or be thrown out. The apartment is a studio in the worst part of Vegas, and she owes the landlord $1,700 for the final month. Before that, medical bills for Emma's mother, Nora's own sister, who died 4 years ago and left behind a daughter and a debt that spiraled and spiraled until Nora was drowning in it. The coffee has gone cold. Nora does not drink it anyway. She just sits there, her hands wrapped around the cup for warmth, watching the clock move toward 3:30 and toward 3:40 and toward the moment she will have to leave this booth because even Janet's patience has limits. That is when the door opens. The cold October wind howls in like it has been waiting for someone to let it inside. And with the wind comes a man in a charcoal coat, his movements economical and controlled, his presence immediately commanding the entire diner's attention. He is tall. His suit beneath the coat is dark, expensive, tailored to his muscled frame. His hair is dark with silver at the temples. And his eyes scan the diner like a general surveying a battlefield, and they land on Nora. For 3 seconds, Giovanni Valenti looks at her. For 3 seconds, he sees her. And then he walks toward her booth and sits across from her without asking permission. "Tell me what is wrong," he says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Nora's breath catches. She opens her mouth to tell him that she does not know him, that he should go, that she is nobody and none of this is his business. But something in his eyes stops her from lying. 2 weeks before Giovanni Valenti walked into Mel's diner at 3:22 in the morning, Nora Hartley stood in her converted storage closet with an envelope in her hands that would change the trajectory of her entire life. The fluorescent light above her cot flickered in that particular way that made her head throb. On and off. On and off. Like a heartbeat that could not decide whether to keep going. 9:47 at night. The Whitmore mansion was silent above her, all the children finally asleep, all the demands temporarily paused, all the invisible work of the day finally finished. She had scrubbed floors since 6 in the morning. Her lower back ached in a way that suggested something fundamental had shifted inside her spine. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind that cost money to manufacture. Her landlord's logo was embossed in the upper left corner. Chen Properties Management, though Mr. Chen no longer owned the building. 3 months ago, he had sold it to a new owner. A new owner with a name that made her hands shake when she saw it printed on official documents. Douglas Hale. She opened the envelope slowly, as if moving gently could somehow change what was written inside. The eviction notice was on letterhead that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that official documents needed to look violent. Red ink. Not black. Red. 30 days notice to vacate the premises. No. Not 30 days. She read the line again, her eyes moving across the words like they were written in a language she did not speak. 12 days. November 3rd, 2024. 12 days until Douglas Hale, the man who had held her down against a bathroom sink and told her that no one would ever believe her, the man whose fists had left marks like a geography of pain across her back, 12 days until he had legal grounds to throw her onto the Las Vegas streets with nothing. The eviction notice included a payment demand printed in those same blood-red numbers. $35,000. Lump sum payment due to reverse the eviction order. $35,000 in a city where she made $870 every 2 weeks, where her rent was $1,847 a month, where she had $34 left after groceries and bus fare and the medical debt that would follow her into the grave. $34. That was all the space between her and homelessness. That was the mathematical distance between her life and destruction. The storage closet was 7 feet by 9 feet. A cot. A plastic bin containing 3 dresses. A light bulb that flickered like it was dying by inches. This was what she had built for herself in 8 years of trying to disappear, 8 years of working double shifts, 8 years of saving every penny and giving most of it to hospital bills for her sister Maria's cancer treatment, 8 years after Maria died anyway, 8 years of raising her daughter Emma alone, 8 years of hiding from the man whose name was now printed on her eviction notice. She looked at the notice again. At the date. November 3rd. 12 days. She counted them in her head like she could make time move differently if she concentrated hard enough. Monday. Tuesday. Wednesday. Thursday. Friday. Saturday. Sunday. Then again. Monday. Tuesday. Wednesday. Thursday. 12 days. She folded the eviction notice and placed it on her cot. Then she lay down beside it, her back against the cold wall, and stared at the ceiling where water damage had created a stain shaped like a fist. The next morning, Nora was pushing Mason Whitmore on the swings in Henderson Park when she saw him. 3:52 in the afternoon. The November sun was already starting its early descent toward the mountains. She had been pushing Mason back and forth for 20 minutes, his small hands gripping the chains, his voice calling out higher, higher, higher. The task felt simple and enormous at the same time. 8-year-old Mason Whitmore had everything she did not have. Parents. Money. A room of his own. And yet he still wanted her. Still asked for her after school. Still asked if she would push him on the swings even though his mother had told her multiple times that the park was beneath the family station. The white pickup truck was parked across the street. She saw it before she saw him, the truck registering as wrong in some instinctive way that sent her body into a state of alert that felt like drowning. Douglas Hale leaned against the side panel, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on her with that same hungry quality that had not faded in 8 years of separation, 8 years of distance, 8 years of believing she had finally escaped. He was 48 years old but carried himself like a man who believed age was something that only happened to weaker people. His jaw was sharp. His hair had gone grey on the sides but remained dark in the center, and he had done nothing to hide the grey, wearing it instead like a mark of status. He wore a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and she could see the tattoos on his forearms, crude and dark, marks that corresponded with the years he had spent in county jail for charges that never quite stuck because he had friends who knew how to make evidence disappear. Nora's hands tightened on the swing chains. "Higher," Mason said. His voice was full and unaware and safe. "Okay," she said. Her voice came out bright and false, the sound of someone performing normalcy while drowning. She pushed him harder, and as his body flew forward in that moment of weightlessness, she felt Douglas's eyes move across her body like a blade wrapped in ice. He was not here to hurt her. Not yet. Not in public. Douglas had never been stupid enough to act in front of witnesses. He preferred the private spaces. The empty apartments. The moments when screaming would not bring help. He preferred to remind her that he knew exactly where she lived, exactly when she was vulnerable, exactly how to find her when her guard was down. Mason came back toward her, and she caught him gently and pushed again, and Douglas raised one hand and tipped an imaginary hat toward her, a gesture of such casual mockery that her stomach turned. Then he climbed back into the truck. The engine started with a deep rumble that sounded like a threat made audible. He drove slowly past the park, past the swings, past her, and she felt the weight of his attention like a stone tied around her neck. "Vivi," Mason said when the truck had disappeared around the corner. Vivi was what he called her. A shortened version of Nora's last name, Hartley. The Whitmore children had given her this nickname when she arrived 3 years ago, and Mrs. Whitmore had never corrected them, which meant it was acceptable. Everything about Nora's existence in this house existed in these small permissions. "Are you okay? You stopped pushing." She smiled. The smile used most muscles in her face and required her to look at Mason like nothing terrible was happening in the world. "I am fine," she said. "Just tired. Should we head back to the house? Your mother wanted you to do your homework before dinner." The mansion where Nora slept was a 5-story structure built in the architectural style of people who believed that size could substitute for taste. 22 rooms. Marble floors in the entrance hall. A chandelier that had cost more than Nora made in a decade. And in one of those rooms, located in the basement adjacent to the laundry facilities, was the 7 by 9 foot converted storage closet where she had been sleeping for 3 years. 11:34 at night. She lay on her cot in the darkness, listening to the house above her settle into the sounds that old money made when it was sleeping. The pipes hummed. The foundation settled. Somewhere far above, Mrs. Whitmore's air purifier ran through its evening cycle. Nora stared at the water stain on the ceiling and performed the calculation she had performed 17 times today. $870 bi-weekly. $2,092 monthly. Minus her rent, which Mrs. Whitmore insisted she pay even though she lived in the basement and ate food from the Whitmore pantry and used the Whitmore utilities and wore the Whitmore family's hand-me-downs. $1,847 monthly for the apartment she would have to vacate in 12 days. That left $245 monthly. For bus fare. For the used dress she had bought last month for $4. For the hospital copay that came every 3rd month for Emma's asthma medication. The math did not work. The math had never worked. She needed $35,000 in 12 days. She had $34 in her pocket. Even if she found a second job, even if she worked 24 hours a day, even if she sold everything she owned, which amounted to approximately $138 worth of used clothing and a single piece of jewelry, a small silver ring that had belonged to her mother, she would still not have enough. Douglas Hale would come for her when she was alone. This was not a theory. This was a certainty. She had reported him to the police 6 times in 8 years. Detective Morris had taken her statement every time, his voice sympathetic, his notepad diligent, his follow-up never materializing. Because Douglas had friends in the department. Detectives who played cards with him. Officers who owed him favors. Men who had learned to look away when his name came up in reports. The law would not protect her. The Whitmores would not protect her. If she told them she had to leave, they would replace her within the week. Emma, her 8-year-old niece, sleeping in a bedroom in this massive house, not her bedroom because Emma slept in the nursery with baby Lily, whom she had been hired to watch. Emma would have no one. Nora closed her eyes and tried to think of a door that was still open. She could not find one. 3 blocks away from the Whitmore mansion, in a penthouse office that occupied the entire top floor of a building downtown, Giovanni Valenti sat at a desk made from mahogany that had been cut from a tree that had been growing for 200 years before chainsaws introduced it to commerce. The photographs were spread across the desk in an arc, each one showing a different angle of a woman pushing children on park swings. The woman had dark hair pulled back severely. She wore a modest navy dress that suggested employment in a household where the family was wealthier than she would ever be. Her face, caught in profile, showed a kind of exhaustion that spoke of 12-hour days and sleepless nights. But the detail that had caught Giovanni's attention was what had happened at the park 3 hours earlier. His security team, 2 men positioned across the street with telephoto lenses, had captured images of a white pickup truck. Douglas Hale's truck, according to the database that kept track of every weapon, every purchase, every registered vehicle belonging to everyone with even tangential connection to the underworld. The security detail sent the photographs up to the penthouse within minutes. Giovanni had been standing at the window, watching the city lights come alive as the sun descended, when Carlo, his right hand, his lieutenant, his brother in all the ways that mattered, had laid the photographs on his desk and said simply, "The woman from the park." Giovanni had seen Emma 3 days earlier. A small girl, no more than 8 years old, had been playing with a toy car in the park while her caretaker sat on a bench, her eyes distant, her hands shaking. A group of teenage boys had started to circle her, their intentions clear and terrible. The girl had frozen. She had not screamed. She had not run. She had just gone very still, the way prey animals go still when predators are near. The woman had stood up then. The caretaker. She had walked straight into the center of the circle and said, "Emma, come here," her voice steady in a way that suggested she had done this before, had placed herself between danger and a child before, had made peace with the price she would have to pay. The boys had backed away because they recognized in her something dangerous. Not physically. Emotionally. Spiritually. A person who had already decided she was worth less than the child behind her, and therefore had nothing left to lose. Giovanni had watched from across the park, and something had moved inside his chest that he had not felt in 15 years, since before his brother had betrayed him, since before trust had become a luxury he could no longer afford. "Pull her employment information," he said to Carlo, still looking at the photographs. Still seeing that moment in the park when she had stood between danger and a child and chosen to be brave. "She is a nanny," Carlo said. "The Whitmore house on Valmorn Drive. Name is Nora Hartley. Age 29. No criminal record. No connection to any organizations. Clean background." Douglas Hale was watching her this afternoon. Carlo's entire body changed. His shoulders moved back. His jaw tightened. Douglas Hale was a small operator in a city full of small operators, a man with just enough connections to stay relevant and just enough brutality to stay feared. He had been picked up 6 times for domestic assault, and every case had been dropped. He was the kind of man who left marks and convinced authorities that the marks were not his responsibility. "We have no jurisdiction," Carlo said carefully. "Whatever situation exists between Hale and this woman, it is not our business." "She protected a child from a predator," Giovanni said. "Many people protect children. Not like this." This woman stood in front of a pack of wolves and did not flinch. Giovanni looked away from the photographs and toward the window where the city sprawled beneath him like something he had conquered and could never keep. His empire covered 5 city blocks. His reach extended through the police department, the courts, the city council. He owned lawyers and judges and federal agents. He had spent 15 years building something that would last beyond his life, something that would survive his death and continue into the future like a scar that could not heal. But his brother had sold secrets to the rival families for money. Had told them about shipments and safe houses and the names of men who would die if exposed. Giovanni had found the list written in his own blood on the ceramic tile of his brother's bathroom, found his sibling hanging from a chandelier, found his entire world shifted on its axis in the space of a single hour. Trust had become impossible. Security had become everything. And now he was looking at photographs of a woman in a modest dress who had stood between danger and a child without calculating the cost. Find out everything about her, Giovanni said. Where she lives. Who she works for. Who she is afraid of. I want to know the name of every man she has ever feared, and I want to know why. Sir, Carlo said, his voice careful. This is not like you. No, Giovanni agreed. It is not. But what Giovanni did not yet understand was that this small choice, to turn his attention toward one invisible woman, to see her when the world had taught her to be unseen, to decide that her protection mattered, this small choice would cost him everything with the families who had kept him alive. This choice would divide his empire. This choice would require him to burn down 15 years of careful construction and rebuild something new, something honest, something that a dead man hanging from a chandelier might have recognized as redemption. But that reckoning was still 11 days away. The marble foyer echoed with the sound of her breathing, shallow, terrified, trapped between the weight of Giovanni Valenti's attention and the knowledge that Douglas Hale waited somewhere in the darkness outside. Nora Hartley stood frozen as Carlo and Gino carried the last of her plastic bins past the Italian marble floors, past the crystal chandeliers that cost more than she had earned in her entire life, and she understood in that moment that she had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. You are safe here, Giovanni said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. He stood in the doorway of the foyer, charcoal suit impeccable, dark eyes carrying the weight of 15 years of decisions that had destroyed men. Douglas Hale will not touch you again. I have made certain of it. Nora's hands trembled. She had $34 in her pocket, literally everything left after paying for the cheapest coffee at Mel's diner the night before. The eviction notice sat folded in her jacket like a knife, red ink bleeding through white paper, a 12-day countdown until she would have been thrown onto the Las Vegas streets with nothing. Now she stood in his home, hired as a nanny at $4,200 monthly, a number so large it felt like a fever dream. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why would you do this for someone you do not know? Giovanni moved toward her with that same measured grace, each step controlled, economical, the movement of a man who never wasted energy. You protected Emma with your own body. 2 armed men approached her in Henderson Park. You did not calculate the cost. You simply stood between danger and a child. He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. That is not someone I do not know. That is someone I recognize. The sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs, small, rapid, the bare feet of a 6-year-old running down the curved staircase. Emma crashed into Nora's legs for a hug before anyone could speak, her princess pajamas rumpled from sleep, her hair a dark tangle. You stayed, Emma whispered into Nora's stomach. The park lady stayed. Nora's throat closed. She knelt, eye level with the child, and felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been sealed shut since she was old enough to understand that the world was not safe for people like her. I am going to be your nanny now, she said softly. I will take care of you. Emma pulled back, studying her with the brutal honesty of childhood. Does that mean you will not leave like the other ones? Giovanni stood silent, watching. Nora made a promise she did not know if she could keep. As long as you need me. I will stay. Later, after Emma had been returned to bed and the household had settled into the particular silence of 5 a.m., Giovanni showed Nora to her room. The door opened onto a space that made her vision blur. A queen bed with white linens. An attached bathroom. A window that faced a garden where roses bloomed in October against all logic. "I have not had a window in 3 years," Nora whispered, stepping inside. She turned slowly, taking in the carpet, the small desk, the lamp with a shade that was not torn. 3 years of living in a closet. "You have one now," Giovanni said. His silhouette filled the doorway, powerful and dark. "Rest until Emma wakes. 7 o'clock. I will introduce you to the household staff at breakfast." She wanted to ask him about Douglas, wanted to know what "I have made certain of it" actually meant. But Giovanni was already turning away, his phone vibrating against his chest, his mind already shifting to whatever machinery of power and protection he had set in motion. The door closed quietly. Nora locked it from the inside, not because she was afraid of anyone in this house, but because after 8 years of doors that did not lock, the simple act of turning the deadbolt felt like prayer. Meanwhile, 3 miles away on the Las Vegas Strip, Sophie Langford stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, binoculars trained on a security feed displayed on her private tablet. The footage showed Giovanni Valenti carrying plastic bins into his home. The footage showed him touching the shoulder of a woman in a grey dress. The footage showed him smile. Sophie had not seen Giovanni Valenti smile in 2 years of attending the same parties, wearing the same circles of wealth and influence. She had worn dresses that cost $5,000 to catch his attention. She had positioned herself in his orbit at restaurants and galas and charity functions, and he had treated her with polite distance, the kind that acknowledges the friendship between her husband Marcus and Giovanni's organization, but no more. Now this nothing of a woman, this mousy little thing who probably owned one dress, had received the smile that Sophie had been collecting for 2 years like coins in a jar. "No," Sophie whispered to the empty penthouse. Her hand moved to her phone, found the number of a man she had contacted 3 days earlier. Douglas Hale. A brutal thing wearing a human face, a man with a record of assault and stalking, a man with nothing to lose. "It is time." Douglas answered on the second ring. His voice came across the line thick with anticipation. "Tell me what you need." "The woman." "Nora Hartley. She is staying at Giovanni Valenti's estate." Sophie's words fell like ice. "I want her gone. Arrested, institutionalized, disappeared, I do not care which. Make her unstable. Frame her. Ensure she is removed before he becomes too attached." Douglas's laugh was the sound of something being slowly torn. "I know Nora. I know exactly how to break her. Give me 72 hours. Sophie transferred the money, $25,000, into an encrypted account, and disconnected. She returned to the window, watched the city lights sprawl below her like a kingdom she would inherit. She had spent 15 years as the trophy wife of a man who did business with power players. She had learned patience. She had learned that the best weapons were not guns, but information, leverage, the carefully placed whisper that turned allies into enemies. She had learned that Giovanni Valenti had exactly one vulnerability, and it had just walked into his home wearing a grey dress and terror in her eyes. Back at the estate, Nora lay in her bed, a thought she repeated like a prayer, and listened to the October wind move through the garden. The roses outside her window trembled. The house settled around her with the sound of settling, the creaks and sighs of old walls and old money, and she allowed herself to believe, for the first time in 8 years, that safety might be something she could hold on to. But in a white pickup 3 blocks away, Douglas Hale sat with his hands on the steering wheel, his mind already constructing the architecture of her destruction. He had loved Nora once, in the way violent men love things, possessively, without consent, with the certainty that ownership and dominance were the same as devotion. When she had left, when she had reported him to police, when she had dared to choose survival over submission, something in him had calcified into pure, patient rage. 3 days. Sophie Langford had given him 72 hours to do what he had wanted to do for 8 years. The wind moved through the city like a blade wrapped in ice, and no one heard the sound of his engine starting, no one saw him drive toward the estate with the patience of a hunter who has already caught the scent of blood. What Nora did not yet understand was that Giovanni Valenti had enemies on all sides, families who resented his power, rivals who wanted his territory, and now a woman of wealth and cruelty who had decided that the best way to destroy him was to destroy the one person he was willing to abandon his entire empire to protect. What none of them yet knew was that this choice, to hire a broken woman, to see her when the world had taught her invisibility, would require Giovanni to burn down 15 years of careful construction and rebuild something new, something that could not be threatened by people like Sophie Langford or Douglas Hale. But that reckoning still had 2 days to arrive. For now, in the darkness of her room, Nora slept without nightmares for the first time since she was 17 years old. And that small mercy, that single night of unbroken sleep, was the moment everything in Las Vegas shifted on its axis. October 17th, 2:41 in the morning. The October wind moved through Las Vegas like a blade wrapped in ice, and in a bedroom on the eastern edge of Giovanni Valenti's estate, Nora Hartley woke to the sound of her bedroom door opening. Not the gentle creak of hinges. The splintering crack of a lock giving way. She sat upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hallway light flooded in, and a silhouette filled the doorframe, tall, broad-shouldered, backlit like a demon drawn from memory itself. Douglas Hale. The man whose hands had left scars across her back 8 years ago. The man the police had refused to arrest. The man she thought she had finally escaped. "Did you think you could hide from me?" His voice was soft, deadly, the kind of quiet that comes before violence. He closed the door behind him and crossed the room in 3 strides, his breathing heavy, his eyes burning with that same hunger she remembered from 1,000 nightmares. Nora scrambled backward against the headboard, her scars burning beneath her nightgown as if his presence alone had ignited them. "Giovanni will kill you if you touch me." Douglas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Giovanni is in New York on business. His men are at the gate. No one is watching you, Nora. No one is coming." He grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward the door. Her scream tore through the silence. Down the hall, Emma woke and began to cry, the child's voice small and terrified. Douglas backhanded Nora across the face. Her lips split open, blood hot and metallic on her tongue. "You are coming with me. Sophie Langford is paying me $50,000 to make you disappear, and I am going to enjoy every second of it." He dragged her into the hallway. Nora fought, clawed at his face, her fingernails drawing blood, her legs thrashing. Douglas slammed her against the wall, his hands closing around her throat, squeezing, her vision sparking black at the edges, the pressure building like her skull would split open. Then footsteps sounded from the stairwell. Carlo stepped into the hallway, Giovanni's most trusted lieutenant, a man with silver threading his dark hair and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jawline. He was holding a 9mm, and the barrel was pressed against Douglas's temple before Douglas could even register the danger. "Let her go," Carlo said, his voice flat and final, "or your brain decorates this wall." Douglas froze. His hands fell away from Nora's throat. She collapsed to the floor, gasping, her lungs burning, her hands shaking as she touched her bruised neck. Carlo spoke into his phone without taking his eyes off Douglas. "Boss. We have a situation." 3 hours later, Nora sat on her bed in the darkness, her knees pulled to her chest, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The October cold seeped through the walls, or maybe it was shock. She could no longer tell the difference between cold and terror, between physical pain and the deeper ache that lived in her bones. Emma slept beside her, the child's small body curled against Nora's hip, one tiny hand wrapped around Nora's pinky even in sleep. That small touch was everything. That small trust was destroying her. Nora stared at the window Giovanni had given her, the window in the room that was supposed to be safe, and her mind constructed a familiar architecture. Run. Take the money Giovanni had paid her, the $4,200, and disappear into another city, another identity, become invisible again. Douglas had found her here. Sophie wanted her gone. She was putting Emma in danger simply by breathing. Her hand moved toward the go-bag she kept under the bed, the one she had never fully unpacked because some part of her had always known this would happen. Then Emma's fingers tightened around her thumb. Nora looked down at the sleeping child, at the girl who had learned to trust again, who laughed on swings, who had whispered in the darkness, "Does that mean you will stay forever?" The question had been so simple. The hope in it so devastating. Nora had spent 8 years running. 8 years of eviction notices and bruises and police who looked away. 8 years of becoming smaller and smaller until she was barely visible. And where had it gotten her? Right back here, with a man's hands around her throat, with a child waking up screaming, with danger following her like a shadow that would not be shaken. She pulled the go bag out from under the bed. Then she put it back. Nora lay down beside Emma, pulled the child close, and whispered into the dark, "I will not run anymore. I promise you. I will not run." Giovanni Valenti's private jet landed at Newark Airport at 4:52 in the morning, October 17th. He was on the highway toward Las Vegas 15 minutes later, driving a black SUV at speeds that made his security detail nervous over the encrypted line. Carlo's voice came through the speaker, explaining the situation. Douglas Hale, inside the estate, restrained. Nora bruised but safe. Emma unharmed. Giovanni drove faster. He arrived at the estate at 5:34 a.m., the desert dawn breaking cold and dry over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of ash and copper. He walked into his home and found Douglas Hale zip-tied to a chair in the basement, his face swollen from Carlo's questioning, blood dripping from his nose onto his shirt. Giovanni did not speak. He took the elevator upstairs, found Nora in the kitchen with Carlo and Gino, saw the bruises blooming across her throat like poisoned flowers, saw her lips split open, saw the terror still bright in her eyes. Something ancient and merciless woke inside him. He turned and walked back downstairs. "Who sent you?" Giovanni asked Douglas, his voice so quiet that Douglas had to lean forward to hear it. Douglas sneered. "Go to." Carlo broke his left hand with a hammer. The sound was like a tree branch snapping. Douglas screamed, high and animal, his body thrashing against the restraints. "Sophie Langford," Douglas gasped when he could speak again. 50,000 to make Nora disappear. 25 up front. She said you were obsessed with the nanny, said you would abandon the families if the girl was gone. Giovanni pulled out his phone. "I need everything on Sophie Langford. Bank records, communications, every dirty secret. I want it in 90 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Douglas, really looked at him, the way a general surveys a battlefield. 8 years ago, you put your hands on her. She reported you. The police did nothing because you had friends in the department. You stalked her. Terrorized her. And now you tried to kill her in my home, in front of a child." "Please," Douglas whispered. Giovanni made a second call. "Vittorio. I have a gift for the Calabrese family. The man who has been stealing their shipments and blaming my organization. Douglas Hale. Come collect him." Douglas's face went white, understanding blooming like a nightmare. The Calabrese family were enemies, rivals who had lost millions to a thief. If they believed Douglas was responsible, they would not kill him quickly. They would make it last. "No. No, please, not them, I can explain." At 6:19 a.m., 12 men in black tactical gear moved like ghosts through the front doors of Giovanni's estate. Their leader was Vittorio, a man with empty eyes and scarred knuckles that told stories of decades spent breaking bones. He looked at Douglas and smiled. "We have been looking for you for 6 months." They dragged Douglas away screaming, begging, his voice cutting off when the van doors slammed shut. The engine started, tires gripping asphalt, and Douglas Hale disappeared into the desert. His body was never found. His screams were swallowed by the sand. Justice delivered not through death but through erasure. Too quick would be too easy. Too merciful. At 8:41 that same morning, Sophie Langford stood at her penthouse window, drinking champagne from a crystal flute, celebrating what she believed was Nora's death. She was imagining the headlines, imagining Giovanni's grief, imagining how quickly he would turn back to the families, back to power, back to men like Marcus. Then the door exploded inward. FBI agents in blue windbreakers flooded the penthouse, weapons drawn. Sophie's champagne glass shattered against the floor. Agents cuffed her wrists while she was still in designer pajamas, her face twisted in shock and rage. By 9 a.m., her photograph was on every news channel, socialite wife of casino mogul arrested in massive fraud ring. Giovanni's investigators had documented everything: the money laundering, the illegal art deals, the bribery schemes that had funded her lifestyle. The evidence was overwhelming. 40 years minimum federal prison. Her husband Marcus filed for divorce by noon. Her friend stopped returning her calls by 1. Her assets were seized by 2. By evening, Sophie Langford had become a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered at country clubs, a name no one wanted to know. She spent the next 4 decades in a federal prison in West Virginia, forgotten and powerless, everything she valued stripped away, the thing she had feared most realized in slow motion: irrelevance. Giovanni watched her perp walk on the television news and felt nothing at all. But upstairs, in the bedroom with the safe window, Nora Hartley sat with Emma curled against her side, and for the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to believe that the nightmare might actually be over. The desert wind had finally stopped its howling. The October wind carries the last dead leaves away, making room for something new to grow. 6 months have passed since the desert swallowed Douglas Hale whole. 6 months since Sophie Langford's photograph appeared on every news channel in handcuffs, a designer life dismantled piece by piece until nothing remained but the hollow shell of who she pretended to be. 6 months since Nora Hartley stopped counting the hours until dawn and started counting something else entirely, the days until a man who ruled an empire asked her a question she thought she would never hear. The garden blooms with impossible colors against the Las Vegas heat. Yellow roses climb the stone walls. Lavender trembles in the warm afternoon breeze. Emma, 6 years old now with her father's dark eyes and a laugh like music, kneels in the soil beside Nora, planting marigolds with the seriousness of someone who understands that living things require patience and care. Nora wears a yellow sundress, the same color as the flowers, no longer hiding beneath gray and brown like an apology for taking up space. Her scars remain, visible now on her shoulders when the light catches them just right, but they have stopped feeling like sentences written in violence. They feel like proof. Proof that she survived. From the terrace above, Giovanni watches them both with an expression Carlo and Gino have never witnessed in 15 years of service. Softness. Vulnerability. The look of a man who has been drowning and finally found shore solid enough to stand on. "Boss," Carlo says quietly, stepping beside him. "You have the look of someone about to do something that will change everything." Giovanni does not take his eyes from Nora. "I made her a promise 6 months ago. I told her I would wait. That I would give her time to heal before asking her to choose this life, to choose me. Today, that waiting ends." In his jacket pocket rests a ring that belonged to his grandmother, a woman who survived the Italian war years and emerged with her dignity intact. The diamond is not large, but it is flawless. Like Nora. Like the way she refused to break even when the world conspired to shatter her. Nora looks up from the soil, feels his gaze like a physical touch, and rises slowly. Emma tugs her hand. "Is he coming down?" "Yes," Nora whispers. "I think he is." Giovanni descends the stone steps with the measured pace of someone accustomed to rooms bending toward him, but there is nothing commanding about his movement now. There is only intention. Purpose. A man walking toward the person who saved his life by refusing to disappear. The garden falls silent except for the wind through the flowers and Emma's breathing, shallow with anticipation because even at 6 years old, Emma understands that something important is about to happen. Something that feels like forever. Giovanni reaches them, and for a moment, he simply stands there, looking at Nora like she is the answer to every question he has carried since his brother's betrayal taught him that loyalty was a luxury he could not afford. Then he lowers himself onto one knee. Emma gasps. Nora's hand flies to her mouth. "Nora Hartley," Giovanni says, his voice deep and solid like an oath carved into stone. "I met you on the worst night of your life. You were counting the hours until a man would kill you, and instead, you stayed alive long enough for me to find you. You taught me that courage is not the absence of fear but the choice to keep breathing when the world wants you to stop. You gave Emma a mother when I thought she would grow up in darkness. You gave me a reason to dismantle an empire built on violence and rebuild it into something that might actually mean something. Will you marry me? Will you stay with me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you were never invisible, that you were always worth fighting for? The ring catches the afternoon sun, throwing fractured light across Nora's face. She is crying, not the quiet tears of resignation but the flooding, overwhelming tears of someone who has finally stopped bracing for the blow that never comes. Yes, she says, and her voice breaks like something precious. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will stay. Giovanni slides the ring onto her trembling finger, and it fits perfectly, like it was always meant to find its way home to her hand. Emma throws her arms around both of them, and they collapse together onto the garden soil, the three of them tangled like roots, like family, like the thing that happens when broken people choose each other and decide to heal together instead of alone. That evening, the house fills with quiet celebration. Carlo and Gino bring champagne, expensive, the kind that costs more than Nora's entire annual salary once was. They toast in the study, the four of them, and Giovanni pulls out a second document from his desk drawer. A new will. A revised will. One that names Nora as guardian of Emma if anything ever happens to him, ensuring that the child will never be alone, never be vulnerable to the families who would use her as leverage. I want you to know, Giovanni says to Nora, that Emma is legally yours now. Not someday. Now. You are her mother in every way that matters. Nora reads the document 3 times, unable to believe that the answer to every prayer she never voiced is written here in legal language that cannot be disputed or taken away. She thinks about the eviction notice with the red ink deadline that sat in her jacket pocket 8 months ago. She thinks about the $34 that was supposed to last her forever. She thinks about the woman she was, hollow, hunted, certain that death was the only exit available. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone who has built a home. Someone who has taught a traumatized child to laugh again. Someone who has convinced the most dangerous man in Las Vegas that she was worth risking everything for. Thank you, she whispers. No, Giovanni says, and he takes her hand, their fingers interlacing with the easy comfort of 6 months spent learning how to love someone without breaking them. You saved me first. The night in the diner, I had already decided to walk away. From the family, from Emma, from everything. I could not see a reason to keep fighting. Then I looked across that booth and saw a woman who had every reason to give up, and she was still choosing to fight. You reminded me what it means to be human. You reminded me that love is not a weakness, it is the only thing that keeps us from disappearing into darkness. Outside, the October wind has gentled into something almost like a blessing. The dead leaves are gone. The garden is ready for spring. Carlo appears in the doorway. Boss, there is a visitor. Giovanni and Nora exchange a glance because no one visits Giovanni Valenti unannounced. No one is brave enough. No one dares. The figure that enters the study is tall, muscular, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face is unfamiliar but his bearing is unmistakable, power, authority, the careful movement of someone trained in violence who has learned restraint. I heard you were no longer in the business, the man says, his accent unmistakably Italian. I came to make sure it was true. Giovanni stands slowly. And who might you be? Dominic Castelliano, the man says. From New York. Your brother Marco contacted my organization before he disappeared. I came to collect on the debt he incurred, or I came to bury you. Depending on which you prefer. The room falls absolutely silent. Emma is asleep upstairs. The garden outside is dark. And in this moment, with Nora's ring catching the lamplight and Carlo and Gino tensing beside him, Giovanni Valenti understands that the price of choosing love over empire has finally come due. Then we have much to discuss, he says quietly. The game is not over. It is only beginning again. If this story moved your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone you love. Subscribe and turn on notifications because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you that even in the darkest moments, there are people who choose to stay when the storm arrives. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone stay for you when they could have walked away? I read every single one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, family is not always bound by blood, but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.